Okay, Hare Krishna, everyone. I'd like to first welcome all of you to the online Srimad Bhagavatam class. I will start off by singing Jai Radha Madhav. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunda Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunda Bihari. Jaya Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Janavallabha, Jaya Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Braja Januranjana, Yashodanandana Braja Januranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunda Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunda Bihari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe, Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Radhe, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra, Jaya Gauranikai, Jaya Gauranikai, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Gurudev, Jaya Jaya Gurudev. जय जय श्री राधा गिरिधारी भगवान की जय, जय जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा मैया की जय, जय गौर निताई की जय, जय श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, जय श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय, जय श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की jai. So once again, I would like to welcome all of you, dear devotees, to the online Srimad Bhagavatam program. Today we will be reading from Canto 4, Chapter 15, verses 1 and 2. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanaय namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswati vyasam tato jayam udirayet shrinvatam swakatha krishna punya sharvana kirtana hridhay antasto hi abhadrani vidunoti suritsatam. Nashta prayashu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati yuttam shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. So today we will be reading from Canto 4, Chapter 15, titled King Prithu's Appearance and Coronation, and we shall be covering verses 1 and 2. So before I kick off with the verses, can I please just confirm, can everyone hear me clearly?
Yes, Mataji, Dandavad Pranam. You can see everything fine.
Thank you. Okay, so just going to move this further up. Okay. So verse 1, I'll recite the verse first. Maitreya uvacham athatasya punarviprayer aputrasya mahipate bahu bhayam mathamanabhyam mithunam samapadyatam. Maitreya uvacha athatasya punarviprayer aputrasya mahipate bahu bhayam mathamanabhyam mithunam samapadyatam. Maitreya uvacha athatasya punarviprayer aputrasya mahipate bahu bhayam mathamanabhyam mithunam samapadyatam. Would anyone like to recite the verse?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavad Pranam. Maitra uvacha atatasya punarviprayen aputrasya mahipate bahubhyam matayam manabhyam mitunam sampadayata.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavad Pranam. I am trying as well.
Thank you.
Maitreya uvacha atha tasya punarviprayer aputrasya mahipate bahubhyang muddhamanabhyang mithunang samapadhata. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anyone else? Okay, would anyone like to read these synonyms?
Maitra uvacha. Maitra continued to speak. Atha, thus, tasya is, punaha, again, biproi, by the Brahmanas, aputrasya, without a son, mahipate, of the king, bahubhyam, from the arms, matya manapyam, being charmed, mitunam, a couple, sampada yata, took bath. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. I'll read the translation. The great sage Maitreya continued, my dear Vidura, thus the Brahmanas and the great sages again churned the two arms of King Venu's body. As a result, a male and female couple came out of his arms. So there's no purport for this verse, so we'll move on to the next one. Verse number 2. Tadrishva mithunam jatam vrishayo brahmavadina ucha paramasantushta viditva bhagavat kalam. Tadrishva mithunam jatam vrishayo brahmavadina ucha paramasantushta viditva bhagavat kalam. Would anyone like to recite?
Yes, Mataji. Tradrishtva mitunam jatam rishayo brahmavadina uchu parama santushta viditva bhagavat kalam.
Hare Krishna Mataji, please go ahead.
Tadrishva mithunam jatam shayu brahmavadina paramascha viditva bhagavatana.
Thank you, Mataji. Would anyone like to read or is there anyone else who'd like to recite?
Yeah. Tadrishta mithunam jatam Rishayo Brahmana Vadina Uchu Parama Santushta Vidita Bhagavat Kalam. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Would anyone like to read the synonyms?
Tat, that, Drishta, saying, Mithunam, couple, Jatam, born, Rashaya, the great sages, Brahmavadina, very learned in Vedic knowledge, Uchu, said, Parama, very much, Santushta, being pleased, Viditva, knowing, Bhagavat, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kalam, expansion.
Thank you, Mataji. Translation. The great sages were highly learned in Vedic knowledge. When they saw the male and female couple born of the arms of Venus' body, they were very pleased, for they could understand that the couple was an expansion of a plenary portion of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Oops, even before that. So we'll read the purport. So would anyone like to read the purport?
Yes, Mataji. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. The method adopted by the great sages and scholars who were learned in Vedic knowledge was perfect. They removed all the reactions of King Bina's sinful activities by seeing that Venus first gave birth to Bahuka, described in the previous chapter. After King Bina's body was thus purified, a male and female came out of it, and the great sages could understand that this was an expansion of Lord Vishnu. This expansion, of course, was not Vishnu Tattva, but a specifically empowered expansion of Lord Vishnu known as Abesha.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
So, Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Anmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurur Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanavitam Tam Sajivam Satavaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Svitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, so I'll just read the purport again, purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So the method adopted by the great sages and scholars who were learned in Vedic knowledge was perfect. They removed all the reactions of King Vena's sinful activities by seeing that King Vena first gave birth to Bahuka, described in the previous chapter. After King Vena's body was thus purified, a male and female came out of it, and the great sages could understand that this was an expansion of Lord Vishnu. This expansion, however, was not Vishnu Tattva, but a specifically empowered expansion of Lord Vishnu known as Abesha. So as we can see, this purport is again a short purport. However, it is very, very impactful. There are three key themes that Srila Prabhupada covers in this purport that I could get out of. So we'll be covering those three themes. Now, the first one is all around the mercy and compassion of the great sages and Munis. So we will be looking at that. The second theme that I could pick from the purport was around the purification process. So we will be looking at the purification process. And then, of course, right at the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about the Vishnu Tattva, that this expansion of Prithu Maharaj was not Vishnu Tattva, but it was an empowered expansion of Lord Vishnu known as Avisha. So we would be looking at the three forms of Lord Krishna. So starting with the first theme, which is around the power and mercy of sages. So throughout this chapter, as well as, or the beginning of this chapter, and it was covered a lot in the previous chapter in relation to the story of King Vena. Again and again, we could see the power and mercy of sages. So we look at the sages, what are their key qualities? So the first thing is that sages are always very, very compassionate. So, and they're always thinking for the welfare of the people. So we saw in the previous chapter that the sages, they throned King Vena for the sake of the citizens' benefit, so that everyone could progress with their spiritual journey. So even though the sages felt that he wasn't fully qualified to sit on the throne, for the benefit of the citizens, they throned King Vena. Then we also look at when Vena did not perform his duty as a king, they did not shy away from telling him that he was not performing his duty as a king. And when the sages' advice was not taken by the king, the sages did not hesitate from dethroning him. And so using their power, they were able to kill King Vena. So we also saw that the sages did not have to use any weapons. Just through the power of their words, they were able to kill King Vena. We also saw that at the beginning of this chapter, the sages, because of that, through their power, and again, because of their mercy for the general populace, they caused the appearance of King Prithu and Mata Archie. Again, it was not something for themselves, but they're always thinking of others. And so we look at that was the cause of King Prithu's appearance. There are other examples. The Srimad Bhagavatam is full of examples of sages' compassion. One good one that we often talk about is Narad Muni's compassion for Dhruv Maharaj. So we saw that unlike in the story of King Vena, the sages were always there counseling the king. They were always available to help the king rule the kingdom. In the case of Dhruv Maharaj, when he went as a 5-year-old boy in search of the Lord in the forest, he had no one. So out of his compassion, Narad Muni appeared and advised him on the signs of devotional service. So again, these sages, they are called three Kala Jana, which means that they know the three features of time, the past, present, and the future. So Narad Muni could see that Dhruv Maharaj would be a very good devotee of Lord Krishna. So out of his compassion, he came, appeared, and advised him on the signs of spiritual realization. We also see another example from the sons of Kuvera. Again, Narad Muni cursed the boys, and the reason for the curse was to stop them from being the killer of their own souls. So the curse was actually a benediction. So anything that the sages do from our material eyes, we might think that it does not look correct, but there's always something over and above that. Then we also see that Vyasdev's mercy on us in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 4, verse 16. We see that Vyasdev could foretell what the future of Kali Yuga would be like. So for our benefit, he gave us all the Vedas, he gave us all the Puranas, he gave us Mahabharata, and of course we know the spotless Srimad Bhagavatam. So we can never repay the mercy of the sages to us. And of course, last but not least, Srila Prabhupada's mercy to us. He gave us everything. He gave us his books, chanting. He gave us devotees, temples, deities, prasadam, you name it. He gave us the full 9 yards. So everything that we, and speaking for myself here, especially everything that we have today is the blessings from Srila Prabhupada. So before Srila Prabhupada came in our lives, it came in my life, there was very little that we knew about devotional service. You know, we didn't really understand the position of Krishna. We knew a little about bhakti, but not in the sense that we know now, especially in terms of what exactly is pure devotional service. So the mercy, the compassion that the sages have, especially Srila Prabhupada towards us, can never ever be repaid. Then when we look at the second point, sages are not afraid to tell the truth. And again, this was revealed in the previous chapter. They will tell things as it is. They will not sugarcoat it. So if when King Bena was not performing his duty as a king, they rightfully told him as it is. And if we compare that with Srila Prabhupada, he has given us Bhagavad Gita as it is, you know, exactly as Krishna intended his message to be. So another quality of sages are that they will tell us things as it is. Then we know that sages would always know the 3 features of time. So they are Trikala Janas. That's the word used to them from the scriptures. And on the appearance of King Prithvi, in the forthcoming verses, you would see that even before King Prithvi started ruling the kingdom, before he started ruling the world, the sages could tell all the wonderful activities that he would perform in advance. So that is a confirmation that they know before time. They could foretell and predict future activities. In relation to this 3 features of time, Srila Prabhupada has given some wonderful explanation. So let's have a look at some of them. The first one is from a lecture that Srila Prabhupada gave in Detroit on June 14, 1976. Srila Prabhupada said, this is called Trikala Jana, past, present, and future. So Yamraj or Lord Brahma or great personalities, they, even great sages, saintly persons, they know the 3 features of time. Then we look at the second example from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 14, in the purport of 17 and 18. Srila Prabhupada writes, as an astrologer can see the future fate of a man, or an astronomer can foretell the solar and lunar eclipses, those liberated souls who can see through the scriptures can foretell the future of all mankind. They can see this due to their sharp vision of spiritual attainment. And all such transcendentalists who are naturally devotees of the Lord are always eager to render welfare service to the people in general. They are the real friends of the people in general, not the so-called public leaders who are unable to see what is going to happen 5 minutes ahead. And then a last example from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 7, verse 26. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, anyone with a material body cannot remember his past life, nor can he foretell his future life, nor can he predict the outcome of his present life. Therefore, he cannot know what is happening in past, present, and the future. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, he cannot know past, present, and future. So these are just 3 examples that I felt were important in terms of understanding the sages, the power that they have, as well as the compassion that they have for all the citizens. So, you know, they are not normal jivas, they are liberated souls. And as liberated souls, they are always thinking about the welfare of others. Then we look at why the sages were so powerful. So just very briefly, We know that all the sages are very, very pure devotees of the Lord. And we know that one who associates with the all-powerful Supreme Lord gets the same qualities like him. So that's the first reason. The other point is that they are strict followers of the principles of Dharma. So they will always follow Dharma religion according to the rules. So they do not deviate from that. Then they perform austerities. Then the scriptures also tell us that they are the Lord's Vibhuti Shakti. So they are portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. So in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 3, verse 27 states, and I'll read the translation, says, all the rishis, Manus, demigods, and descendants of Manu, who are especially powerful, are plenary portions or portions of the plenary portions of the Lord. This also includes the Prajapatis. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, those who are comparatively less powerful are called Vibhuti, and those who are comparatively more powerful are called Avesha incarnation. So that was in relation to why the sages were so powerful. Then we look at where are the sages now. So one of the things that we'd often would think about is where are the sages in today's age. So we can say that the sages are in the pages of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we constantly read Bhagavatam. So Nitya Bhagavatam Sevaya. So when we serve Bhagavatam, we are seeing the sages in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then the sages are also in the books of Srila Prabhupada, in the words of our spiritual masters. So our spiritual masters are in the form of sages. So they are as powerful as the sages that we read about in Srimad Bhagavatam. And then in the association of pure devotees. So this was in relation to the first theme. Now, the second theme from these two verses that I could come across was purification. So we noticed right at the beginning of the of verse 1. Sorry, Prabhuji. Okay, so right in the beginning of the first verse, we see that the sages, they churned, or even in the previous chapter, right at the end of the chapter, the sages first churned the body of King Vena, and they produced they gave birth to a personality known as Bahuka. So Bahuka represented all the contamination that was in King Vena's body. So the actual churning of the thighs of King Vena to produce that personality represented purification. So the churning of King Vena's body, especially the thighs by the sages, represents purification. And then we look at that the person that was born from King Vena's thighs, Bahuka, who we understand was dwarf-like in appearance, he became the father of the Naishida race. They're tribal people, not very cultured, sinful by nature, and they live in the mountain regions. So this purification process, we notice that it is also in other Srimad Bhagavatam pastimes. So a very common example that we can use here is that when the ocean was churned in Canto 8, Chapter 8, the first thing that appeared before all the transcendental items were appeared from the ocean was a poison called halahal. So that poison can be compared to Bahuka because it represented all the anarthas or all the contamination. So that appeared first before all the transcendental items appeared. So just like that poison in us, we also have all these anarthas from our previous birth. So from time immemorial, we've got anarthas that we've been carrying along with us. And so we also need to be purified before we can have Krishna appear in our lives. So the appearance of King Prithvi and Mata Archie represents the appearance of transcendence. So divinity would only appear once contamination is removed. Then we look at the purification process is nicely explained also in this particular chapter, canto in Srimad Bhagavatam. So in canto 10, verse 2, chapter 2, verse 8, Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport. So he says, symbolically, Mother Devaki's constant fear of Kamsa was purifying her. A pure devotee should always fear material association. And in this way, all the asuras of material association will be killed, as the Sadgarbhasuras were killed by Kamsa. It is said that from the mind, Marichi appears. In other words, Marichi is an incarnation of the mind. Marichi has 6 sons: Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moh, Mada, and Matsarya. So lust, anger, greed, illusion, madness, and envy. The Supreme Personality of Godhead appears in pure devotional service. This is confirmed in the Vedas, Bhaktya Evinam Darshayati. Only bhakti can bring one in contact with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead appeared from the womb of Devaki, and therefore Devaki symbolically represents bhakti, and Kamsa symbolically represents material fear. When a pure devotee always fears material association, his real position of bhakti is manifested, and he naturally becomes uninterested in material enjoyment. When the 6 sons of Marichi are killed by such fear, one is freed from material contamination within the womb of bhakti. The Supreme Personality of Godhead appears. Thus, the 7th pregnancy of Devaki signifies the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. After the 6 sons of Kam, Krodh, Lobh, Moha, Mada, and Matsarya are killed, the Sesha incarnation creates a suitable situation for the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, when one awakens his natural Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna appears. This is the explanation given by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. So I thought that was a very potent point, because we all need to purify ourselves if we are to fully understand or be fully engrossed in devotional service. So how does this apply to us? So we look at our churning process given by Srila Prabhupada and given by the Lord himself is chanting. And our churning tool is the japa beads. So what we need to do, the 3 things that purify us is firstly chanting the names of the Lord. We also have listening and glorifying the Supreme Lord. And then we also have association and serving of pure devotees. So in terms of the key one, the key is chanting. Now, how is key chanting? So all 3, chanting the names of the Lord, listening and glorifying the Supreme Lord, and associating and serving pure devotees are equally potent and equally important. But chanting is key because it is the chanting is the process for this age. So in Kali Yuga, chanting is the key activity that we need to perform in order to purify ourselves. The listening and glorifying and association would make our chanting even better. So next up, we look at how come chanting is key. It gives us the direct path to our goal. It's our direct connection with Krishna. It purifies us regardless of what stage of chanting we are performing. So we definitely know the proof is in the pudding. So we know that the story of Ajamil, even though Ajamil was not chanting, he was not even chanting, but because he took the Lord's name, he was able to get delivered. So it's purifying in whatever state it's done in, and it's the recommended path given to us by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So next up, we look at, or we challenge ourselves in terms of how effective is our chanting. And, how do we know that the chanting that we do is effective? And, are we short-charging ourselves? So what do I mean when I say, are we short-charging ourselves? Now, what I mean by that is that all of us, we know that our goal of life is to go back to Krishna. We also know that chanting is purifying, regardless to what stage of chanting we're doing. Even if we are doing offensive chanting, we know that in some way, shape, or form, it is still purifying us. So sometimes there is a tendency for us to think that regardless to how I'm doing this service, I am going to get benefited regardless. So in fact, that is what I mean when I say we are short-charging ourselves. So we know that the goal is to get to Krishna. The important thing is that are we seriously taking it so that we can go back to Godhead in this lifetime? So if we become complacent because we believe that this is working for us, and at some stage we are going to get the mercy, then are we really, really working towards the goal, or are we becoming complacent? So here's the self-assessment. And before I go any further, I must say that there are two lectures that I got inspired from. One was from Nitai Sevani Mataji. I'm sure all of you in the forum are familiar with Mataji. Her lectures are really blissful. And the other one was a lecture on fault finding that I listened, and it was given by Giriraj Swami Maharaj, His Holiness Giriraj Swami Maharaj. So the simple self-assessment will tell us if we, how our chanting is. The assessment is if we are feeling the taste. So how to test that you are taking the goal of going back to the spiritual world seriously? There are two things that'll happen. The first question to ask ourselves is that if our propensity to find fault in others is reducing. If the answer to that is yes, then yes, we are on the right path. The second question to ask ourselves is whether the type of relationship that we have with Krishna is not a passive one, but an active one. Now, the question that we'll have is, okay, then what is a passive relationship and what is an active relationship? And now this is where I had the greatest realization. Now, a passive relationship versus an active relationship is defined as follows. Now, in a passive relationship, one does the following. We chant our 16 rounds. We follow the four regulative principles. We get up in the morning, we do our rounds, we do our Mangalarti, morning Arti, we read Srimad Bhagavad Gita, we go to our workspace, and we return back. In the evening, we cook prasadam, we offer it to Krishna, we do our Arti, and then we go to sleep. In addition to that, we also do some seva aligned to our routine. And then the cycle just repeats. Now, this is called a passive relationship. And this is, when I heard this in the lecture, I was like, wow, I thought this to me is my devotional service. Now, if that is a passive relationship with Krishna, what is an active relationship? But before we get to that, I just wanted to clarify that I had to really, really, really spend a couple of weeks just going through this over and over again, because for me, this looks like a perfect formula for going back to Krishna's world. So then I remember that there is a verse in Nectar of Instructions, verse 2, and the fourth practice there that says, practicing the spiritual rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement. Now, this is what I also meant when I said, are we short-charging ourselves? So because we are in Srila Prabhupada's movement, there's always a tendency, and if we do something long enough, it becomes a habit and we start doing things out of habit. We also have the knowledge that we need to do it. We've also taken a vow that we need to follow the four regulative principles. We've got to chant our rounds. So a passive relationship with Krishna is all about us doing things because we know that it ought to be done. And again, that is something in the Nectar of Instructions, verse 2 is sort of saying that sometimes we could become complacent. So that's the point that I'm driving here. When we have a relationship with Krishna, we should never ever become complacent. We should always remember the goal. The goal is to return back to Godhead. And so that explains passive relationship. Now, there's nothing wrong. So that's another point that I'd like to make very clear. There's nothing wrong in terms of having a passive relationship, because what could be worse? We could not have any relationship at all. So over here, because we're speaking amongst devotees, I guess the point being is that out of the 3 stages, where one is no relationship at all, or the relationship is only revoked when devotees come every year during Kartik, and we talk about doing one little devotional service will yield 1,000 times benefit, and so everyone picks up on that. So that's no relationship at all, even though that itself is some sort of pious activity. Then we've got passive relationship, which is what we generally, I'm speaking for myself here, we tend to fall into. I'll give another example of a passive relationship. So sometimes when, and again, I'm talking about myself here, when we hear about, say, Vaishnava Aparad, and that's really great. Vaishnava Aparad is really, really a great, it's when you hear about Vaishnava Aparad, I generally get quite worried, because in the material world, and if you work in a corporate organization, we tend to be we are encouraged not to be humble. You've got to be assertive. So when you look about a Vaishnava's best quality is to be humble. It's quite difficult to be humble. And if you really understand Vaishnava Aparad, if one can think, and I'm saying this because I've thought of it, is that sometimes it's better not to associate, because I will prevent myself from Vaishnava Aparad. However, that is my wrong thinking, because that shows that I am moving towards a passive relationship. So I'm trying to avoid something in order to not do something. So an active relationship in relation to Vaishnava Aparad would be that I'll be missing out on so much. So I should still continue to associate with Vaishnavas, because the mercy that I would receive is so much more than not associating, if that makes sense. So all I'm saying here is that we've got to be very, very careful that we don't become complacent in our bhakti. So what then is an active relationship with Krishna? So Nitai Sevani Mataji explained that an active relationship with Krishna is when there is something happening in our bhakti. So it means while we are doing all of the above, so all the above sadhana, our sadhana practices that we do, we are doing it very, very joyfully. So we express gratitude, there is tears, we talk to Krishna, and so on and so forth. So that's an active relationship with Krishna. Again, my understanding is that, that means that's pure devotional service. The answer to that is not, no, that's not pure devotional service. It just means that we are getting better in purifying ourselves, because we are really, really connecting with Krishna. And yes, eventually that leads to pure devotional service, because we all know what is pure devotional service. Anya bhilashata sunyam. So, it's another level up, very, very top. So a passive relationship is what definitely I know I have. But in terms of turning that into an active relationship is something that I need to work towards. Then we look at, this is why chanting is supported by listening and glorifying the Supreme Lord and associating and serving of pure devotees. Because if we do that, then we experience taste. So I'll give an example. Recently attended that Prabhuji's lecture. who's from Brajbasi. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, but you know, when you attend lectures like that from pure devotees, you come back and then that just keeps playing in your head. And then next morning when you get up to do your chanting, you are already associating with Krishna.
His Grace Dinabandhu Prabhu.
His Grace Dinabandhu Prabhu. Yes, yes. So then we look at how do we test. So Mataji went on to explain that if we have a passive, and this was quite a strong message for me. She said that our test of faith in Krishna is what determines whether we have a passive relationship or an active one. So there's three things that that make up faith. The first is knowledge about Krishna. The second is belief in Krishna, and the third is trust in Krishna. So the 1 and 2 we definitely excel in because it comes from reading the scriptures, and I know all of us are very adept at reading the scriptures. We know where to quote from what, so they, you know, it's a big tick for me. I know, and I'm sure all of you you know, really excel in that. Then we've also got number 2, which is believing in Krishna, and that comes from knowledge as well as from hearing Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. So here's what Mataji was saying. She said, if we've got 1 and 2, we should consider that to be actually at a very low level in terms of our faith in Krishna. Our faith in Krishna is only determined, or it's at its best when we have total trust in Krishna. And then that trust in Krishna equates to total conviction and surrender that no matter what comes my way, Krishna is my only true well-wisher. And my actions should actually match my conviction. Now, this is a component that needs strengthening if our relationship with Krishna is not an active one. So if it's not an active one, the point that she was making was that our version of our faith is quite limited. So we need to expand it, or I definitely need to expand that. Then, even before we go to the theme 3, there's two stories. There's one that she shared, and there was another one that I could remember as she was giving the class. Now, to the story that she shared, and I think it's a very beautiful story. It talks about there in the village, there was this Mataji whose husband was suffering from leprosy. So the village elders would tell the lady that she should go to Kasi, and in Kasi, in the river Ganges, if she got her husband to take a bath, then he would be cured of all his diseases. So because they were constantly telling her that, she started believing that herself, and then she said, okay, I will do that. So the village elders, as well as some other villagers, were also going to Kasi, so she decided to go as well. So because the husband was handicapped, she had to carry him, and so after a little while, she got very, very tired. So when she got tired, she just asked the same villagers, you know, if they could help carry her husband with her. And so that's when the villagers replied, oh, no, Mataji, we can't do that. And she said, why not? And they said, for the obvious reason, he's got leprosy, so he's contagious and we'll get it. And then she said, okay, but then you all have told me that if I go to Kasi and if I go and, you know, he takes a bath in Ganga, he would be rid of leprosy, right? So you all are also going to Kasi and you are also going to take a bath. So even if you were to get leprosy, you know, you would also be cured. So the next thing that she knows is that they all ran away from her. So they were quite angry that they just left. So that's the point, that, you know, very often we have knowledge. So the villagers had knowledge. They also believed in it, which is why they were going. But when it came to the practical side, that actual trust that, you know, this is going to work was not there. Then, of course, we also know that very famous example that Srila Prabhupada often uses in the Nectar of Devotion lectures, which is around when Krishna in Dwarka once had a headache, and all the physicians, all the doctors came and that they couldn't find a cure. So Krishna gave the cure himself. So he said, I need some dust from the lotus feet of my devotees, and they started off with Naraji, and then Naraji was like, no, that's going to be a great sin, so I'm sorry, but I can't give dust of my feet to Krishna. So they went to everyone, including the queens of Dwarika. And then finally Krishna said, okay, just go to the gopis. And so the gopis, they were like, they didn't even think twice. You know, if Krishna asked for it and it was going to cure Krishna, then take all the dust that you want from our feet. They did not think about the repercussions. So that's just emphasizing trust in Krishna. Like, you know, that becomes the key component of loving Krishna, that we totally trust him. So Krishna should be the plan, and it should not be the contingency plan. That's the key about faith in Krishna, that he should not be part of, like, you know, often we have plan A and plan B. So we're doing this because Guru, Sadhu and Shastra say that we should do it, but then we've got other plans happening on the side, and so Krishna becomes a contingency. And then we look at the third theme, which was around Avesha Avatar. How are we placed for time? So we'll very quickly go through this. So we know that King Prithvi and Mata Arju were a divine couple, and they were none other than the partial expansions of Vishnu and Lakshmi. And verse 2 states that the couple, that seeing the couple, the sages who were very learned in Vedic knowledge, they were very pleased, and they understood that the couple was an expansion of a plenary portion of Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada also explains that this expansion was not Vishnu Tattva, but a specifically empowered expansion of Lord Vishnu, known as Avesha, or Shakti Avesha Avatar. So I thought, and I know this would be expanded on in the upcoming verses, but just very quickly, I just wanted to talk about the three principal forms of Krishna. And I've taken most of the sources from Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela, chapter 20, which very nicely explains all the three principal forms. So there's a Swam Roop, the Tadikatma Roop, and Avesha Roop. In his original form, Krishna as a cowhead boy in Vrindavan is his Swam Roop. And then we've got when the body is slightly differently manifested and the features are a little different in transcendental emotion, it is called Tad Ekatma Roop. And then, of course, in the Tad Ekatma Roop, there are pastime expansions as well as personal expansions. So, and then particularly in relation to the Avesha avatars, in 246, it is explained, and I'll just read the purport here. It says that the Shakti Avesha avatars are categorized into forms of divine absorption, so Bhagavat Avesha, such as Kapil Dev or Rishabh Dev, and secondly, divinely empowered forms, and of which 7 are foremost. So we have Sheshnag in Vaikuntha world, empowered for the personal service of the Supreme Lord, and he has the Seva Swa Sevana Shakti. Ananta Deva, empowered to bear all the planets within the universe, Pura Dharana Shakti. Then we've got Lord Brahma, empowered with the energy to create the cosmic manifestation, Shrishti Shakti. Then we've got the Kumaras, empowered to distribute transcendental knowledge, Gyan Shakti. Narad Muni, empowered to distribute devotional service, Bhakti Shakti. And Maharaj Prithvi, specially empowered to rule and maintain the living entities of Palana Shakti. And Parshuram, specifically empowered to cut down rogues and demons. And so he's the Lord's Dushta Damna Shakti. So an Avesh Rupa is empowered by Krishna, but is not a direct Vishnu Tattva. And there will be more sessions on this in the upcoming verses. So just in case anyone wanted to have a good understanding, there is this, if you Google, there's this diagram that goes into detail. So I definitely found it very useful. And then in terms of recapping what we covered today, so we looked at, out of these 2 beautiful verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, there were 3 key themes, and I'm sure there would be other themes that I will open the floor and you can add to. It was about, the first was around the power and mercy of sages. Then we looked at the purification process, and that really meant a lot to me, because I gained a lot of realizations from assessing my own purification and where it was at. And hopefully what I shared was of little use or use to any one of you. And then we'll very briefly looked at the Lord's Avesha Shakti or Avesha Avatar. So I'll now open the floor. Should anyone would like to add any comments, add to what I've covered, or if anyone has any questions. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandvat Pranam.
And Pranam Prabhuji.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful class. Yeah, just like we are connecting Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam together with the very good examples. The mainly thing what relates to me is the passive and active relationship. That's the very, very good one in our daily life activities. That's the one just catches my mind. It's very good explanation. You explain, and it's from excerpts from Nitai Shivani Mataji. Yeah, is one of the excels of getting this.
Yes.
Yes, beautiful. However, your explanation about this Shaktavishavata, we can see this chart in the Golok chart. Is
Yes.
everything is given very nicely,
Very
and
nicely.
that also relates to Madhya-lila, Chaitanya Madhya-lila 165, chapter 20,
Yeah.
165
One.
onwards, up to 300 and something.
Yeah.
Everything is there.
Everything is
And we
very
got the
nicely
ready-made
explained.
chart. Yeah, ready-made chart that can help us to
Yes. Yes, Prabhu, I
understand this.
totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for your contribution.
Hare Krishna Mataji, nice class with elaborating points, central points. And there's like the 3 main points, 3 themes, key themes. Mercy and compassion of the sages. They are really Lokamangalam.
Yeah.
And most I like that purification process, that comparison with our process, our churning process. We are doing, we try to purify ourselves. And that's we are deviating from that all unearthers. Yeah.
Yes.
And we are also struggling. And yes, chanting road is our Japo bits. It's so nice.
Yes.
Yes, very nice, Mataji. Yeah, I like that
Thank
point. You. Yes, and
you.
nicely you explain all the points why sages are so powerful. Where are the sages now? Really, those who are actually not in the spiritual level, not in ISKCON, they don't know what to do. Though they have the bhakti, but we know where are the sages now, and that's why we are in the process of Srila Prabhupada's. And that's the last one. That means theme 3. This is a little bit, it's a bit tricky for me. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes it's expansion. So and also that's I know that our Srila Prabhupada is in Saktavesh Avatar.
Yes, Mataji, that's true.
And you nicely explained about the taste of faith in Krishna. Yeah, real true. When in our life also comes, we also tell so many things, but when times come up, we don't know what we'll do. Very nicely explained. Thank you for your class.
No worries, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji, for a very, very nice class.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Mataji, in addition to what
sorry, Mataji.
In addition to what you said, I just wanted to add, I also like the point where you said the potential for getting benefit from making advances spiritually by associating with your devotees is a lot more than the risk of aparad. So we should always take the opportunity and not shy away.
Mataji, you're a bit faint.
Maybe Mataji is far away from the microphone. Yeah, please come in, near that your computer so we can hear you. Tulsi Sebba Mataji.
Can you hear me now?
It's still not very clear, Mataji.
Okay, something's wrong with my audio. Okay, Mataji.
Okay, that's better. That's better now.
Is it? Okay. What I was saying is, I like that point of, you said that the potential for living spiritually, but associating with more advanced devotees is far more than the risk of apram. So we should always take the opportunity to shy away from it. I like that point very much. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. That was a key learning for me too, Mataji. And I heard that from Giriraj Swami, that very often when we hear about that, we shy away. And, nowadays, we've got YouTube, we've got Bhagavatam at home, and we think that we can deliver ourselves, but that's wrong thinking. No matter what happens, it's very important for us to associate with pure devotees. Absolutely key. There's so much in preparing for this class. I think I've learned so much. So one of the things that I forgot to say right at the beginning is that, I do seek the blessings of everyone that's in this forum, and especially to you, Nanbraj Prabhu and Shama Mataji, for encouraging me to take the seva. I am not an eloquent speaker at all, but just the process of preparing, if I was sharing with my Prabhu, I don't mind just preparing for classes, but not then handing it over to someone else to deliver, because it's the preparation that really helps in my purification. So thank you for all of you for patiently listening.
It's a very nice class here, Mataji. Also, I would like to say that's, I think when we are giving the class and we are preparing the class, so you are thinking, that's actually, I think this is the actual Krishna consciousness. Also, when you're going to sleep, you are thinking, I can point at this point, I can at this point, how much time will be there. It's you're going through so many scriptures and so many lectures. It's nice. It is, it's means we can purify ourselves in this way. Very true.
Hare Krishna Mataji, just adding to you are already done the churning process. Now you got the you got
I still got a long way to go, Prabhuji.
Yeah, but you are already started, so this shows the churning process is working.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very good churning. Thank you so much.
No worries, thank you.
Connecting all ends in the center, and the center is Krishna. So beautifully explained. You have connected everything very nicely. That's what the class needs. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. I think looking at the time, if there's no more comments, then we could end here.
Vancha kalpataruhascha kripa sindhu vaevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namo ananta koti vaishnavrinda ki jai. Har praise Ranga Devi Dashi Mataji ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
God Premanande Hari Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.